At Growing Bolder, we share the importance of mindset about aging, about focusing on opportunity and possibility and not simply loss and limitation. As many of you folks know, we do produce a TV show that's called What's Next because we're all thinking about what's next and we all want to make it as personal and impactful as possible. We share the belief that we value life by the way that we live it, by the daily choices that we make. And we like to remind people that the clock is ticking, that time, like all commodities, becomes more valuable the less of it there is. We encourage people to be themselves without apology because if not now, then when? And we do all of this by sharing the stories of ordinary people who have found their own way to experience joy and to live with passion and purpose, no matter what their challenges might be. We feature ordinary people because their examples are relatable, they're believable, which of course makes them more impactful. Their example can inspire others to make the most of their lives. And I say all of this today because there is a riveting novel called The Measure that essentially asks the question, what would you do with your life if you knew exactly how much longer you had to live? It then examines the consequences, the far-reaching ripples, if you will, of those consequences through the lives of ordinary people. The Measure is about how we measure relationships, how we measure success and happiness, and how all of us as individuals value life. And this is not just another one of the over 100,000 new novels that are published each and every year. It debuted at number 6 on the New York Times bestseller list. It is widely considered one of the best science fiction books and best debut novels that's been written in many years. It was written by Nikki Erlick, and Nikki didn't just kind of luck into the concept of a fascinating thought experiment and somehow cobble together a good read. She graduated summa cum laude from Harvard University with a degree in comparative literature, where she was also an editor of the Harvard Crimson, after which she earned a master's degree in global thought, whatever that happens to be, from Columbia University. The story of The Measure's creation is almost as fascinating as the book itself. So let's find out more as we welcome the author herself, the debut novelist who everybody's talking about, Nikki Erlick. Nikki, how you doing today?
Hi, that was quite an introduction. Thank you very much for having me.
Sometimes I'm apt to go overboard when I get excited to talk to somebody. So my apologies for making you listen to all of that. Let's go back to not to the beginning of Nikki Erlick, but to the beginning of The Measure, because as I understand it, you were a traveler writer when the pandemic hit. The travel industry totally shut down. You lost your job in the same week your mother became one of the first to contract COVID. You moved back home. How did all of that challenging conspiracy of events actually lead to what we're talking about today?
Yeah, I know it feels like, my gosh, a long time ago, but that really was sort of the origin of the book, the origin of everything that my life has been sort of taking on since then. But yes, as you said, I was working as a travel writer. I'd always loved writing and journalism, and sort of fell into a job as a travel writer, which was a dream job. And I hear so many people who tell me like, that's my dream job to get to travel professionally. And it was amazing up until March 2020, of course, when, the border shut down, the travel industry was just totally decimated. I lost my job within, a week into March. And really for the first time was sort of blindsided and felt like I had no next step. I didn't know, I had been on a path for so long. And I felt like then in that moment, like the rug had been pulled out from under me. I didn't know what I was going to do. I felt like it was a huge personal setback, professional setback. And then of course, went into lockdown, I took on sort of ghostwriting as a way to kind of, keep trying to make money during that time. But I did have to move back in with my parents, which also felt like kind of the ultimate, personal rock bottom. And that, I'm very lucky now looking back that what seemed like failure, seemed like the worst of it, ended up being this totally unexpected kind of gift. And, my parents were like, yes, keep trying to kind of, freelance and make some money where you can, but also like, what about that book you've been, saying you want to write, that you've been trying to write, that dream of writing a novel, which I hadn't really been working on as much because I had a day job, and, all of a sudden I had this free time. And so they were like, focus on the novel. And, I'm so lucky that I have these parents who really did support me and sort of push me to pursue that dream. And so I ended up spending, so many hours a day all throughout the course of 2020 writing what became The Measure. And it's really, I try to hold on to that time as a way of reminding myself that, you don't know how you're going to look back on something in the future, that what I thought in the moment was, setback and failure ended up becoming this, one door closes and another one opens kind of moment. And I couldn't see it at the time, but now, years later, looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was, I have a completely new perspective on what I thought was a terrible time in my life actually becoming kind of the start of my dreams coming true, really. And so I do try to kind of hold on to that perspective about sort of, what we think might be failure 5 years from now might have been a gift.
I obviously want to ask you about the book, but let's stick right there for a second, because, we talk to people all the time about overcoming their fears, fear of rejection, fear of embarrassment, fear of failure. And here you are, as you mentioned, one of the worst times of your life. Why did you not fear failure? Why were you willing at that point, do you think? Is it just because you had the support of your parents? There had to be something inside you that knew you could do it.
Yeah, I definitely, the attitude that I'm expressing now was not the attitude that I had in the immediate aftermath of, of everything happening. There was certainly, there was probably a week spent kind of wallowing and being like, why me? What am I going to do now? A week of sort of really sitting in sort of the shock and the fear and all that. And then my parents were like, that's enough, that's enough of that. What are you going to do with that? And so, I tried to then be like, okay, I've been given something, which is a challenge, but where are the opportunities here? And the opportunity was that the challenge of being unemployed was that now I have, 10, 12 hours a day that I would have been working on my day job that I now can work on this passion project that I haven't had the time for before. And so I think, the fear didn't go away. And, there was certainly still, as I was spending months writing this book, there was, huge amounts of anxiety and self-doubt and that, voice in your head being like, this isn't going to work. No one's going to read this. You're never going to get published. Like, and you really just have to somehow block that out. It's really hard. But absolutely, there was still, all of those voices, all the negative thoughts were there. But I was like, this is a dream. And so I have to at least give it a shot because I think I would more regret not having given it, a fair chance than I would, putting myself out there and getting rejected.
The voice you have to listen to, Nikki, is that of mom and dad. All right. Give us the elevator pitch. What is the hook? Where did The Measure come from? What inspired it?
The Measure was actually inspired by ancient Greek mythology and their belief in sort of their conception of fate, that they believed there were these three fates, these three kind of sister goddesses who would weave these threads of fate on their spindle and determine the amount of time that every kind of human living down below would receive. And so they would, measure out a string and snip the string, and that was sort of your lifespan. And so my thought was like, that's a super fascinating kind of conception of fate. What if it was real? What if these strings were real? And what if I gave them to people? What would we do with them? What would we do with our strings on a personal level, an individual level? How would it affect our relationships with people? And then how would it impact kind of communities and society much more broadly? And so The Measure was born from just this one what if question. And it, completely took on a whole life as I was writing. And I decided to send to send the strings in a box for each person. So the measure opens when these boxes arrive, and everyone on Earth receives a box with their string inside. And the box is sort of meant to be a nod to another ancient Greek myth of Pandora's box, and this idea of, can you resist the temptation to look inside? And so the story, really centers around the fact that people are now given this choice of whether or not they want to open this box and measure their string and learn how long they're going to live. And we sort of enter a new world in which some people have looked and they have this knowledge, but some people have not looked and they're kind of going on living life as usual. And sort of what dynamics does that create?
Very interesting. I mean, to try to figure out, everybody's going to react differently and the ripples of that. So suddenly everybody on Earth is faced with the very same choice. Do you want to know how long you're going to live? And if they do, what are they going to do with that knowledge? And Nikki, you have, actually, as you've written this book, and I imagine inhabited the persona of your different characters, you've lived that choice many, many times over and over from a different perspective. So let me ask you, would you open the box?
I would really try not to. I feel like I can't say definitively no, because how could I really know how I would react? But my goal would be not to, and would be to keep the box, somewhere in my house though, where I could kind of catch glimpses of it every once in a while, and maintain the mindset, as you expressed, at the opening of this, that that the time is now. We only have a certain amount of time. Whether or not you look in your string and know how long you have, your time is limited. And I would try to kind of use just the presence of that box in the house somewhere to live more, more mindfully, more intentionally, and more gratefully. Just grateful for every day, and to try to stop wasting time.
Have you seen the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still?
No, I haven't.
You haven't?
No, it sounds very familiar, so I'm sure this is an embarrassing thing that I'm admitting, that I have not seen this book.
No, and I told Jill, our producer, that I was going to ask you about that, and I thought I might be embarrassing myself. The reason I ask you that, the original The Day the Earth Stood Still came out in 1951, and then it was remade in 2008 with Keanu Reeves. And basically, the connection that I drew personally is that it was a day when everything changed globally for everybody. There was a new reality that never before existed, and it changed the way people thought about everything. I'll get off of that, but watch the movie. I'd be curious to see.
Absolutely.
It's a really interesting science fiction movie. And I read somewhere, Nikki, that originally, as you were writing this, your first notion was to make it a love story between just a couple of people, and then you decided to expand it until you were sharing the story of 8 different people. What made you decide to make it global, bigger, broader?
Yes, my first thought was, so I have this world, these strings are arriving, whose story might be interesting to explore there. And, the initial thought was, well, a love story between 2 people, one who gets a long string and one who gets a short string, and, how they reconcile the fact that they are, in love and planning a future together, but now have vastly different life expectancies. And that story did make it into the book, but I just felt like there were so many other, perspectives and storylines and characters who I couldn't ignore, who just, were kind of like knocking on my head sort of as I was writing. I felt myself wondering kind of how would a doctor respond in this world? What's going on in the hospitals and the healthcare system when they now have something that is so, cataclysmically kind of changing everything they do, and what is going on politically. How would this impact the kind of socio-political landscape of mostly America? That's where the book is set, but kind of more globally as well. And I just felt like this is such this is this huge kind of universal crisis that happens in the book, and so it has to be explored from a diverse array of perspectives and angles. And obviously, I couldn't touch upon every possible perspective, every possible reaction to the strings, because that would be a 20,000 page book. But I sort of eventually settled on these 8 characters who, as you mentioned, I think most of them are really just ordinary people who are now faced with this kind of extraordinary decision to make, and these extraordinary kind of circumstances around them. And that to me was, that was the interesting question. It was going to be kind of how do just, normal folks respond when something like this sort of strikes the whole world.
And as you mentioned, Nikki, the tentacles of this story are limitless. It could go in any direction. So have you satisfied your appetite for this particular story? Might there be a sequel? What are you going to write next?
I don't at the moment have plans for a sequel, although I feel like I purposely left the ending of the book, it's a little open. There's a chance to kind of return. Some character storylines are finished, but there's, potentially new character storylines introduced. But, I've now lived in the world of the strings for, oh my gosh, since 2018. So it's been a long time. And that's when I first had the idea of the strings, even though I wrote most of the book over, 2020. So I was ready to kind of, put that to bed for a little bit and move on to a different world. But I suppose never say never.
Yeah. One of the interesting creative decisions that you made and another world that you could leap into would be where in the heck did the box come from? Because you never reveal that. It just, here they are. And you made a choice just to leave that there, didn't you?
Yes, and it's a choice that I get to hear a lot of readers' opinions on all the time. I've had some people be like, "Oh, I just, thank God you didn't kind of reveal that. Like, I loved the mystery. I loved, focusing on the people instead." And then other readers are like, "I was a little mad at you." They're like, I liked the book, but I'm a little mad at you." And I think for me it was. Certainly it came up as a question when writing the book. Do I want to kind of get into more of the, the sci-fi of it and the supernatural aspects and kind of create a whole, my own mythology around where these boxes came from and who has this power. But that wasn't really what interested me. What interested me was, telling a story about the human experience and human emotions and what this obviously fantastical kind of sci-fi, way into the story. For me, that, it was less about that. And it was more about kind of what the human characters do with this crazy premise and, what something that is not realistic can reveal about our, actual real world.
I love that. I think it's impossible to read The Measure, to even read about The Measure without visualizing it on a screen. And I know the TV rights have been acquired. Can you confirm, Nikki, that they have actually been acquired by Higher Ground, which is Barack and Michelle Obama's production company?
Yes, that is true. Yes. That's a phone call that, you never forget in the rest of your life.
That's exciting. I know it's in development. Are you a consultant to it, or you've got to feel pretty confident that it's in good hands?
I feel pretty confident. I'm happy to, like, my world is writing books and, other people's world is transforming them for the screen. And so I'm happy to kind of, stay in my lane.
We're talking to Nikki Erlick, who has written a provocative novel called The Measure that everybody's talking about. So we are as well. And, on the outside of the box, in the recipient's native language, because this happens across the entire globe, is the inscription, "The measure of your life lies within," which is meant to be literal, I think. I know you'll correct me if I'm wrong, Nikki, but is it a stretch to say that maybe in a broader sense, one of the takeaways, one of the morals of the story is that the true measure of our life is really not within the box, but it is within ourselves?
Absolutely. I think, that phrase changes meaning over the course of the book. And when the boxes first arrive and it says, "The measure of your life lies within," it's the indicator to people that, the length of time you're going to live is inside this box. So, if you want to learn that measure, open up the box. If not, keep it closed. But over the course of the book, the characters start to kind of question what that, what the measure actually means and the way that the characters measure their lives, the way that we all measure our lives is up to us. And for some of the characters, it becomes about, their relationships, their families, their kind of the people they love and who love them back. For other characters, they focus more on their professional fulfillment or kind of social impact and and activism and the legacy that they're leaving in their community. These are all different ways that we can measure our lives, our impacts. But for me, the most important takeaway was just that, no one can define that measure for you. You have the ability to define that measure for yourself, the way that you measure your life. And that, no matter how long we live, how long or how short, everybody's life has equal value and impact and purpose. And all of the characters, no matter if they have long strings or short strings in this book, they come to realize that, and they leave their own impact and their own legacy in their own way.
Well, it's an amazing work of art and a great contribution to everybody. So thank you for that. And Nikki, I could not begin to tell you how to write a best-selling novel, but I can list the things that would lead to happy, healthy, active longevity, because that's what we do, and that's curiosity, creativity, resilience, the ability to adapt and to accommodate, and you got them all. You got every little bit of that. So as a young woman who has been through this downtime, only to write this very provocative and thought-inspiring piece, what do you think about your future? Are you optimistic as you get older? Because we do live in this ageist culture, and so many people think that the best of their life is behind them. What do you think?
No, I'm super optimistic. I think I'm very lucky that I am in a field in sort of writing and publishing where there are no age limits. Some of the greatest writers are in their 80s and 90s, and they've been producing all their lives. And some people honestly don't start writing a book until they've retired, and then they figure out, oh, this is actually something that I've kind of always liked to do. I like reading. Let me see if I can write a book now that I'm in a new stage of my life, a new stage of my career. And I think that's incredible that there's no age limits on kind of having a dream and having a passion. And so I would love to keep writing for as long as I am able to, punch keys on a keyboard, and for as long as people are willing to read what I write. And so I think I'm lucky that I am in a space in kind of this creative world in the world of the arts where I don't see any age limits at all.
Amen. I love that. If you're willing, Nikki, you have given some great material to a whole lot of book clubs all over the world. Book has been published in many, many languages, over 24, I think. It's funny, this is the first time this happened. We've interviewed a lot of people on this program, and one of our executive producers, Lynn Nixon, excitedly told me a few weeks ago that her book club was reading a book called The Measure, and had I ever heard of it? And I said, we're interviewing the author on our program in just a couple of weeks, and if a couple of the members of your book club would like to give us a question, we'd be happy to ask it. And one thing led to another. And we said, well, how about if we just bring them on and let them ask the question? Are you okay if we do that now, Nikki?
Absolutely.
Let's bring in Lynn Nixon.
Hello, Nikki. So nice to meet you. We have, including myself, 3 members of the Low Bar Book Club.
Let me stop you right there. When she says low bar, Nikki, she's not talking about the quality of the literature that they read.
I did have to ask. Yeah.
Yeah. They're talking about the fact that you can throw throw some Cheetos on the table and everybody's happy.
Nice.
Yes.
Nice.
We come as we are. So I'm Lynn. We have Shelley and Elaine. So I'll just throw out a question first, if that's okay. You mentioned a little bit about taking the ripples of, what this measure meant and how it played out in society. One of those was the labeling of the short stringers and the long stringers. And I was just curious about your decision to do that. And it felt like an important part of the narrative that, that's just something we do as a culture. So I was interested to hear a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. I think a lot of that kind of the, societal consequences of the strings came a little bit later as I was writing. And, I had the concept, I sort of created these characters. And then as I was writing, began thinking more and more about just what would the impacts be on, this bigger kind of community and even national level. And my initial thought and my sort of hope was that, these strings arrive and maybe it makes people more compassionate and more empathetic because we now have this sense that, anyone around you could have gotten a short string, or that someone in their family could have gotten a short string. Maybe we'll be more sort of, kind to one another because of that. But I just thought that didn't seem super realistic, given the way that kind of we have always behaved over the course of history. The fact that we do have a tendency, especially when something, new and unknown and frightening is happening, as was happening in this book, to kind of revert to our more sort of selfish tendencies, the kind of fear of people who are different from us rather than, empathy for people who are different from us. And so I do get into that in the book, and how we kind of find new ways to label ourselves into kind of groups that are like us versus them. And, the way that we do have kind of a tendency for discrimination and prejudice. But my goal was that, the book ends on a more hopeful note. The arc is sort of bending towards justice and progress over the course of the book, as I, like to believe is happening in our real world as well. And so, I wanted to explore the realistic ways that we do behave as people, but, to really make sure that I keep that kind of hope and optimism alive, that we don't have to always repeat the same mistakes.
No, that's great. I think you very much accomplished that.
Thank you.
Shelley or Elaine, you want to go?
Yes. Well, it's very nice to meet you. And I brought the book club. I was told about it from a lady who is 90 years old, from her book club. And she passed it down to her daughter, who is in her upper 60s. And then she passed it down to me for our book club. And then I have now passed it on to my daughter. So
Oh my gosh.
it is a
Wow.
multi-generational book, and very interesting to hear the different generations talk about their impressions of it. I guess my question is, I wanted to be Amy in the book. I loved her writing the letters. I loved her getting together with Ben, and actually not seeing her string and being okay with that. Is there a character that you particularly resonated with, or felt like that was your character?
I think there are probably little bits of me sprinkled in a lot of the characters. Hopefully not too much sprinkled in the more sort of villainous characters, um, but I do, I do feel like my line of thinking around kind of whether or not I want to have this knowledge most closely aligns with Amy's knowledge and with her sort of mindset in the book. And I did, I mostly modeled sort of from my life the relationship between Nina and Amy, the two sisters, off of my relationship with my sister. And, kind of gave my professional sort of journalistic background to Nina, one character. But, I sort of purposely wanted to keep the book pretty removed from my real life, because I didn't exactly want any of my friends or family to read the book and think that they were seeing themselves on the page. Felt like that might invite a little bit of chaos into my life. And so I was like, this is, it's very fictional.
Right.
It was very much my, my imagination. And honestly, that's what's fun about writing, is the fact that I got to kind of step into the mindset of people who are so different from me. People whose lives and experiences and careers are just, very different from mine. And I got to, imagine what that would be like. And I think that that's a really, really powerful tool just for kind of building open-mindedness, for building curiosity, and for building kind of empathy.
Thank you.
Elaine, you want to go?
I just was wondering what you're writing next.
I am working on a new book right now that will, if I can meet all my deadlines, hopefully come out summer of 2025.
Oh, wow.
And it's not a sequel, but I feel like it has a lot of similarities to the measure. It's also an ensemble of multiple different characters who's kind of find their lives coming together. And it takes place over the course of a cross-country road trip, which I took myself as a big, we talked earlier about sort of confronting fears. I had a huge fear of driving. Specifically, I just drive, like every time I tried to learn how to drive, it gave me a lot of anxiety. And so it took me until I was like in my mid-20s to finally get my license and start driving. And so I was like, I'm going to confront this fear by going on a cross-country road trip. And I did. And that sort of inspired the setting of my next book.
Great. We will look forward to that one.
Thank you.
We definitely will.
Well, that is great, and let me thank the Low Bar Book Club for their participation. Lynn, thank you for wrangling all of them. And Nikki, you're a tough act to follow. You don't need me to tell you that. I'm sure your publisher and your agent are reminding you of that. And as you write this book for 2025, do you feel? I mean, how do you duplicate the success that you had with The Measure? Do you feel pressure to do that? Are you stressed about that?
I'm pretty stressed about it, yeah. But I think, for me, it's less about, will this book, sell as well, or, will it be as sort of successful in that sense? And more just that, I feel so lucky and so kind of humbled by the fact that The Measure has really touched so many people. And I mean, this book has been out, for a while now, and I still every day am getting new messages from readers all around the world who have discovered the book and something about it resonates with them. Maybe they're, contemplating this question in their own life, or they're, dealing with the challenge in their family, and they take the time to kind of send me a message and just share why the book meant something to them. And that's so incredible. Like it still kind of blows my mind that is happening. And so my hope is just that the next book and future books will kind of, touch people the same way and resonate with them on the same level. But even if they don't, I think, I'll still be proud that this book is out there and that it has resonated with people.
You have a lot to be proud of, Nikki Erlick. The book is called The Measure. It asks the thought-provoking question, what would happen if we knew our own fate? It's available just about anywhere you can buy a good book. Cannot wait to see it on the screen. And of course, you can learn more about The Measure and Nikki Erlick at nikkierlick.com. That is NIKKIERLICK.com. Nikki, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks to the book club. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.